I recently stumbled upon a policy paper that read like a fever dream of geopolitical competition. It laid out a ticking clock scenario on the Horn of Africa, claiming the US and China are locked in a desperate race to be the first to recognize Somaliland. The language was urgent. It framed Somaliland, which has operated with its own government since 1991, and holds a legal claim to independence dating back to June 26, 1960, as the ultimate prize in a new Cold War. The narrative is incredibly compelling. It warns that if Washington doesn't move now, Beijing is ready to swoop in, grant recognition, and seize control of the Berbera port, a gateway to the Red Sea where roughly 12% of all global trade flows every year. It creates this intense sense of strategic FOMO, making it seem like a bidding war where the first country to sign a piece of paper wins the region for the next century. But as I looked closer at the actual mechanics of Chinese diplomacy, the tension started to feel a bit manufactured. There is a massive structural reason why Beijing is arguably the last country on Earth that would want to recognize a breakaway state, regardless of how many minerals or ports are at stake. It turns out that this race we're being told to fear might not be a race at all, but a very clever bit of storytelling designed to force a hand in Washington. To see the real picture, we have to look at the one red line that Beijing refuses to cross, even if it means losing the prize of the century.
That framing is so crucial, isn't it? Because it really pits this idea of, immediate tactical gain of port, strategic access against what is actually a deep, almost unchangeable diplomatic doctrine.
Exactly. And when we start our deep dive into the information, this whole idea of China being in a desperate race, as you said, it just kind of collapses.
It really does. It falls apart under the weight of their entire foreign policy architecture. I mean, China's whole system for how it deals with the world is built on this one single concept.
And recognizing a place like Somaliland would just shatter it.
Completely. And that concept is, for them, totally non-negotiable.
Okay, so let's go right there, to that structural obstacle. Our first focus is this diplomatic red line, this idea of sovereignty and the non-recognition principle. Why is the specific principle, territorial integrity, such an absolute for Beijing?
Well, it's everything. It's the foundation of their legitimacy, both at home and on the world stage. For Beijing, the guiding concept for literally all of its global engagements is the principle of national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
And this isn't just some vague idea they talk about.
Not at all. It is the absolute bedrock. Every trade deal, every security discussion, every single diplomatic action stands on it. You could almost think of it as the ultimate insurance policy for its own borders and its own internal stability.
And the connection here, it's so explicit. We're not talking about some subtle calculation. It's like these policies are a mirror image of each other, especially in the Horn of Africa.
Precisely. The One Somalia policy is a direct, unambiguous reflection of the much more famous One China strategy. Yeah. These two policies, they're not just parallel, they're fundamentally and mutually reinforcing.
So it's like a domino effect.
Exactly. Think about it. Yeah. If China were to recognize Somaliland, they would be legitimizing the breakup of a sovereign, UN-recognized state. That one act would instantly pull the rug out from under their entire position on Taiwan.
Or on its claims over Xinjiang and Tibet.
Of course, all that diplomatic consistency they've built up over decades, gone, sacrificed for one regional port. And that's a trade-off that Beijing is just. They're never going to make it.
And we have confirmation of this direct link. I was reading one analysis that noted this relationship is almost transactional. It said, Somalia still signs on to the One China policy, and likewise Beijing reciprocates with a One Somalia principle.
That reciprocity is the strategic anchor. And we don't even have to guess what Beijing's position is. It's ironclad.
They've said it publicly.
Oh, very publicly. The Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Mao Ning, she explicitly declared that China supports Somalia's unity. Her exact words were, Somaliland is part of Somalia. And she confirmed Beijing's support for Somalia in upholding the UN Charter.
A statement like that leaves absolutely no wiggle room, does it? No matter how attractive the Berbera port might look on a map.
None at all. It's a definitive line in the sand.
What's so fascinating here is how the very entities that Beijing is trying to isolate, Somaliland and Taiwan, have, actively used this diplomatic fault line to their advantage. They've built this alliance that is just overtly defiant.
It's a textbook case of geopolitical leveraging, really. Since 2020, Somaliland and Taiwan, which of course calls itself the Republic of China, have set up these very high-profile representative offices in each other's capitals.
And this wasn't an accident. It was a very deliberate, coordinated move.
For sure. It was a strategy by both of them to try and break out of their diplomatic isolation and, maybe more importantly, to project a different kind of regional model.
Right, and they frame this alliance in a way that's a direct critique of China's whole engagement model in Africa. It becomes this battle of ideologies.
It does. Taiwan specifically positions this relationship as a countermodel to what they call China's bad governance model for Africa. They're pushing this idea of cooperative partnerships based on shared democratic values, not the kind of asymmetric or debt-fueled relationships Beijing is often accused of.
That's very deliberate messaging, especially for an audience in Washington. And Taiwan is backing it up with more than just words.
Oh, absolutely. They're providing very tangible support to create lasting ties. They announced they're building a $22 million medical center in Hargeisa.
And critically, it's not just civilian projects.
No. They've also provided scholarships for Somaliland's military officers, so they're essentially helping to professionalize and modernize their military. And then in 2022, they signed an energy and mineral resources cooperation agreement.
Which opens the door for exploration and drilling.
Exactly. This is Taiwan using strategic soft power and very concrete infrastructure support to build deep roots that are, really difficult to just pull up.
So with this clear, open defiance happening, how has Beijing responded? Because we know the rhetoric has been pretty strong.
Intense is the word I'd use. Intense and aggressive. I mean, you get the standard lines from the foreign ministry urging everyone to stick to the one China principle. But the most aggressive move came after a meeting between China's special envoy for the Horn of Africa, Xu Bing, and Somalia's president.
And the statement that followed was quite something.
It was a powerful signal, not just to Taiwan, but to the entire region. Xu Bing vowed, and I'm quoting here, "We will not leave them alone if anyone dares to do anything to sabotage the national sovereignty and territorial integrity of China."
Wow. That sounds less like a diplomatic note and more like a public threat. A declaration of intent to defend Mogadishu's claims.
Absolutely. And if Beijing is willing to use such combative language to protect the principle of sovereignty, it tells you everything you need to know about the diplomatic cost of them ever reversing that principle.
And the broader consequences would be enormous, right? It goes far beyond just the Horn of Africa.
Far beyond. China uses diplomatic pressure relentlessly to reverse any global engagement with Taiwan. We've seen it time and time again. Since 2016, a total of 10 countries have cut ties with Taipei and switched to Beijing. Nauru and Burkina Faso are recent examples.
So their whole foreign policy machine is designed to enforce this one idea of territorial unity.
The entire thing. It's a global machine. And if Beijing were to recognize Somaliland, they would immediately be legitimizing separatist movements everywhere, from Catalonia to Kurdistan, and most importantly, they'd be handing a gift-wrapped precedent to Taiwan.
The hypocrisy would just cripple their diplomatic leverage overnight.
It would be an impossible position to defend, a self-inflicted wound of historic proportions.
And it's not just China's position. The recognized government in Mogadishu has its own zero-tolerance policy.
A very firm one. They've severed ties with some really crucial partners, Kenya, Guinea, the UAE, since 2020. And why? Specifically because those countries engaged with Somaliland. Mogadishu makes it crystal clear, recognize Hargeisa, and you sacrifice your partnership with the capital.
So when you put all of that together, the absolute need for diplomatic consistency on a global scale, the risk of validating separatism, and the guaranteed immediate loss of a key strategic partner in Mogadishu, the whole calculation just changes.
It does. The Berbere Report isn't the ultimate prize in that scenario. Upholding the diplomatic red line is.
So the premise of this race for recognition, at least when you apply it to China, is it's fundamentally flawed.
Completely. Recognition would mean throwing away decades of credibility, actively undermining the one principle they use to protect their own territory, and destroying a solid partnership with the recognized government. Yeah. For China, the global consistency of the sovereignty principle will always outweigh the value of any single port. Somaliland recognition is, for them, a complete non-starter.
That leads us very logically to the next part of this. If China can't risk destabilizing everything by recognizing Somaliland, then its influence must come from somewhere else. It must be based on a deep existing relationship with the recognized government.
That's right.
So let's pivot to that. Let's look at the strength of that partnership. Cementing the partnership, Beijing and Mogadishu. This isn't some new friendship. It's a relationship that goes back decades.
The historical depth is really impressive. I mean, China and Somalia established diplomatic relations way, way back in December 1960.
And it's important to remember, this wasn't just a passive handshake deal.
Not at all. Somalia played a vital, very active role in supporting the People's Republic of China on the world stage. They were a key advocate for the PRC to take China's seat at the UN, back in 1971.
That's a huge deal. That kind of early political support, it creates a foundational bond that goes way beyond just opportunistic trade deals.
For sure. It creates a deep well of political goodwill.
And we're seeing that historical bond being actively reinforced today. It's not just something they talk about. The relationship has been formally upgraded.
Yes. In a very clear signal of long-term commitment, the relationship was formally elevated to a strategic partnership in September 2024.
And what does a strategic partnership actually mean in practice?
It means it's high level.
Yeah.
It encompasses politics, economics, security, the whole package. And you see this reflected in the frequent high-level meetings. President Xi Jinping and President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed have met twice recently, once in Riyadh in 2022, and again in 2024 at FOCAC, the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation.
And those summits are where the big commitments are made, right?
That's where major policy and funding decisions are locked in. It shows that Mogadishu's political importance to Beijing is consistently being elevated.
In a region as fragile as the Horn of Africa, stability and security for the recognized government are just paramount. So what kind of concrete support does China actually provide Mogadishu to help them maintain that stability?
The support is really twofold. It's political and it's material. Politically, China has provided consistent, very strong backing for the federal government of Somalia in international bodies like the UN.
The arms embargo lift was a big one.
A huge one. China signed the UN resolution that finally lifted the decades-long arms embargo. That was a massive vote of confidence, really. It was aimed at letting Somalia reassert its own national sovereignty and build up its defense capabilities.
And on the material side?
On the material side, China provides military support equipment directly to Mogadishu. This helps with counterterrorism efforts and with the very long, very difficult process of rebuilding the Somali National Army.
And that support becomes critically visible when regional tensions flare up. We saw China jump in immediately to defend Somalia's position during a major dispute recently.
Absolutely. When Somalia got into that dispute with Ethiopia over the memorandum of understanding that Ethiopia signed with Somaliland for sea access,
China didn't hesitate.
They came out strongly for Mogadishu.
Immediately. Foreign ministry officials backed Mogadishu, condemned the deal as a violation of sovereignty. That kind of swift, firm political backing in the middle of a major regional crisis just shows you how much value Beijing places on its strategic partnership with the federal government. That loyalty is a much more stable currency than any kind of speculative port access.
Beyond the high-level politics, this partnership is really cemented through decades of on-the-ground development aid. When you look at the scale of the projects, it suggests a real long-term interest in Somalia's society, not just tactical gains.
The continuity is really striking. China has been providing aid to Somalia since 1963, and the names of the projects themselves, they tell a story of nation building. We're talking about major national landmarks.
Exactly. Fundamental infrastructure.
Yeah.
The National Theater Somalia, the Hargeisa Water Supply Project, the Benadir Maternity and Children's Hospital, Mogadishu Stadium, the Belowing Farm. These aren't temporary projects. They are foundational pieces of infrastructure and social services. It shows a commitment that has somehow survived decades of instability.
So let's talk about the recent financial commitments. The history is impressive, but what's the current concrete support that tells us this isn't just a memory?
The commitment is very robust and very recent. Just in 2024, President Mohammed secured a significant $28 million grant at the FOCAC summit. That's direct financial aid.
And material aid, too.
Yes. On top of that, China provided 1,300 tons of food aid to Somalia. And economically, the relationship is strong. Bilateral trade hit nearly $1 billion, $972 million in 2024.
What's being traded?
China's mostly exporting electromechanical products, textiles, and they're importing goods like frozen fish and sesame. That volume creates predictable, mutually beneficial ties.
And the investment goes beyond just commerce and concrete. It extends into softer areas like education and health, which I think shows a level of cultural trust.
Precisely. China and Somalia signed a cultural and educational cooperation agreement way back in 1978. And they've been offering scholarships to Somali students continuously ever since.
And the medical teams?
The medical teams are a huge part of the story. Between 1965 and 1991, China sent 13 medical teams, that's 400 personnel, to Somalia. This long history of cooperation in health and education, it just shows a relationship that operates on so many levels, far beyond immediate economic or strategic math.
So if we step back and look at this relationship objectively, China has this strong, formalized, long-term strategic partnership with Mogadishu. What does that permanence really mean for that race narrative we started with?
It makes the race narrative moot. Just doesn't make sense. China already has substantial, formalized, and stable influence through the internationally recognized capital.
So they don't need to go looking for it somewhere else.
Why would they? The long-term commitment, reinforced by the strategic partnership, the development aid, the political support, it all gives Beijing predictable, authoritative access to the region. It's completely unnecessary and, frankly, strategically counterproductive for China to gamble this established relationship on some speculative ties with Somaliland.
So it's stability over turbulence.
Every time. China's choice is always going to favor stability through established partnerships over regional turbulence for an unproven port relationship.
Stability and predictability. Those really do seem to be the hallmarks of Beijing's approach in the Horn of Africa. And to fully get why the Somaliland gambit is just the opposite of their strategy, we need to zoom out a bit to the regional framework. Let's talk about China's strategic approach to shared prosperity in the Horn. How does Beijing structure its entire regional strategy to prioritize development and stability across the board?
Well, China is making a very significant and deliberate shift in its engagement. Historically, their focus was often, described as economics first.
Right. Just build the roads, build the ports.
Exactly. But now they're adopting a much more ambitious approach under their comprehensive national security concept. This means moving beyond just building things and actively working to shape the security and geopolitical landscapes in the region.
And the main vehicle for this is the Global Security Initiative, or GSI.
The GSI is the primary framework.
Okay, so let's unpack that for a moment. What is the GSI in simple terms? It's being presented as this alternative to the Western-led security order.
In essence, it's a framework designed to position China as a global provider of stability. It de-emphasizes military alliances and puts all the focus on cooperation and development as the main pillars of security.
And in Africa, what does that look like?
When you actually read the GSI concept paper, the fight against terrorism in Africa is explicitly highlighted as a top priority. But, and this is the critical part, they link counterterrorism directly to the need for economic development.
This shift was really clear at the last FOCAC summit.
Very clear. At the 2024 FOCAC, China emphasized its growing security role, not through intervention, but through capacity building.
And the resource commitments they made really confirm that. This is about investing in African nations' own security capabilities, not a unilateral Chinese deployment.
Absolutely. The commitments from that summit were staggering, and they were all focused on building internal resilience. China committed $140 million in grants just for military assistance.
And training.
A lot of training. They're creating 6,000 military and police personnel and inviting 500 young military officers to visit China. This isn't passive economic aid. This is a deep foundational investment into the existing sovereign security infrastructure of their African partners.
Which signals a long-term commitment to continental stability, not regional destabilization.
Precisely.
And that focus on stability connects perfectly to China's broader philosophy on counterterrorism, which basically argues that poverty and underdevelopment are the root causes.
That philosophy is absolutely central to what they're doing in the Horn. China hosted the Horn of Africa Peace Initiative, which was a landmark moment. It was really its first proactive role in a regional security mechanism.
And the message was consistent. Development is the solution.
Yes. Chinese officials maintain that military solutions alone just aren't enough. Instead, they argue that economic development, facilitated by massive infrastructure projects under the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, creates environments that are unfavorable for terrorist recruitment.
The logic being, if people have jobs and infrastructure, they're less likely to be radicalized.
That's the core of the philosophy.
To see this strategy in action where stability is prioritized above all else, we really have to look at their model partner in the region, Ethiopia. The sources all describe Ethiopia as the gateway for the BRI on the African continent.
Ethiopia is perhaps the single most critical partner for China's long-term vision for the region. It holds a comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership with Beijing, and its location is just perfect for linking Africa, Asia, and Europe.
And Beijing has put tremendous resources into making Ethiopia not just a market, but a manufacturing hub, this idea of the China of Africa.
They are actively working to build it into that. The scale of the investment there just underscores how dedicated they are to this long-term industrialization vision. And that offers a much more predictable source of influence than some quick port deal.
What are the figures like?
The investment figures tell the story. China is Ethiopia's largest source of foreign direct investment. They'd poured $4 billion into the country by 2017, and that helped create something like 110,000 jobs over 2 decades.
So this is about supporting a structural economic transformation.
Exactly, which guarantees decades of a stable partnership. It's the complete opposite of the high political volatility that would come with recognizing a breakaway state.
And the most visible, tangible sign of this commitment to connectivity has to be the railway. We can't talk about the China-Ethiopia relationship without talking about the railway.
The Addis Ababa-Djibouti Electric Railway is the absolute flagship example, largely Chinese-financed, Chinese-constructed, and critically, it's the longest electric transnational railway in Africa.
It's the region's umbilical cord for trade.
It is. It gives Ethiopia, a landlocked nation, vital, predictable access to the sea through Djibouti. This kind of sustainable, long-term infrastructure locks in access to trade corridors much more securely than banking on the political recognition of a speculative port authority like Berbera. The railway is an enduring asset, no matter how the regional politics shift.
And China's support extends into other crucial sectors, like green energy, which aligns with Ethiopia's own goals.
That's a key element of the model. China is supporting green energy projects there. Our sources say it's 100% focused on renewables like hydro and wind power.
Which includes building power lines across borders.
Right, building cross-border power transmission routes to Djibouti and Kenya. This cooperation on energy is vital for Ethiopia's industrialization strategy. It ensures that all these new manufacturing parks have the reliable, clean power they need to grow and attract even more investment. It's a holistic approach.
And maybe the clearest signal of China's commitment as a reliable partner is their willingness to stand by Ethiopia when the country hit financial trouble.
Reliability is the brand they want to project. And yes, when Ethiopia had payment difficulties with its debt, China stepped in. They rescheduled and restructured a portion of that debt.
It wasn't a punitive measure.
No, it was an act that showcased China as a consistent, understanding, long-term partner. Someone committed to Ethiopia's stability, even through tough times. That kind of gesture builds an invaluable amount of trust in geopolitics.
So when we contrast this established, stability-focused approach with the manufactured narrative of a race for Somaliland, the choice for Beijing just becomes obvious. Why would you risk all of this for a single port?
You wouldn't. China's strategy is built on maximizing stability, predictability, and shared economic growth. By investing heavily and consistently in established, recognized states like Somalia and Ethiopia, Beijing ensures predictable, long-term access to the region's core economic corridors and its big emerging markets.
They're seeking influence through stable, mutually complementary economies.
Exactly. Like using Ethiopia's manufacturing goals to fit into their own global supply chains. Recognizing a breakaway state would undermine the very credibility and consistency that makes China such a valuable partner to its existing allies. It would be an act of really strategic self-sabotage.
The focus on Ethiopia's industrial potential really clarifies this. The Ethiopian government's push for foreign investment, which hit $4 billion in 2018, and all its legal reforms, they're creating a stable, welcoming environment.
And that stability is attracting global attention, not just from China. You see strong investment interest from the US, the UAE, Europe. The UAE's Dubai Chamber, for example, is actively targeting sectors like agriculture and manufacturing there.
They're shifting from just selling products to Ethiopia to making them in Ethiopia.
Which shows a huge amount of external confidence in this long-term strategy.
And this industrial push, especially in things like clothing and shoes, it really leverages Ethiopia's huge demographic advantage, a young workforce of 40 million people. That's why that China of Africa label really sticks.
It's a massive comparative advantage. Chinese companies already there, like the Mohan Group, they explicitly say their success is because of the large domestic market, the low cost of labor and electricity, and this friendly, disciplined young workforce.
And the government support helps them compete.
It does. Tax incentives, duty privileges, it all encourages adding value inside the country. The development of huge industrial parks, like the one in Hawassa where they make products for global brands, shows this isn't some distant dream. It's already happening. It's a stable, high-potential environment for long-term capital.
And this kind of high-level, sustained investment in stable governments is what gives China its lasting leverage, making the pursuit of a fleeting opportunity in Somaliland strategically unnecessary.
When you analyze China's actual diplomatic behavior, this premise of a desperate geopolitical race for Somaliland recognition is just fundamentally inaccurate.
It doesn't hold up.
Not at all. China's adherence to the principle of national sovereignty isn't a flexible tactic. It's the structural foundation of its foreign policy. It's rigidly enforced through those complementary One Somalia and One China strategies.
And in the meantime, they've cemented this robust, decades-long strategic partnership with the federal government of Somalia.
Exactly. Supporting its territorial unity through political, military, and development aid. And at the same time, they're securing their regional influence through these massive long-term investments in partners like Ethiopia, focusing on stable infrastructure, green energy, and industrial connectivity through the Belt and Road Initiative and the GSI.
So in a way, they already have what they need.
China already holds significant and stable influence on the Horn of Africa through these established sovereign governments. To recognize a breakaway state like Somaliland would not only betray its core non-interference doctrine and endanger its global diplomatic consistency, but it would also undermine the existing, predictable, and mutually beneficial relationships it has cultivated with its most crucial partners in the region. China's strategy is one of deep, principled engagement and shared prosperity, making it the least likely external actor to risk regional stability for a speculative port deal.
So what this deep dive ultimately reveals is that the race for Somaliland is really an elegantly constructed piece of diplomatic theater. The question we should be asking now is not if China will enter the race, but rather why certain actors in Washington are so intent on using Beijing's perceived threat to justify an interventionist policy that fundamentally contradicts China's most guarded global doctrine.